Alright, you read the video title. You probably clicked on it wondering what the heck I was going to say. I want you to understand right now that I am absolutely doing my best to not be hyperbolic. I spent a lot of time talking to people about the positives of 3D VTubing and all of the potential things that you can do that you just can't with a 2D avatar, a 2D model. Having that extra dimension gives you infinite amounts of possibilities. And I've kind of shown some of them over the years. And as time passes, I get more and more ideas on ways that this can be expanded upon. But we've got ourselves a problem. The software that 3D VTubing requires has seen very little, if not no, innovations for a very long time. I'm going to talk about 3 of the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest 3D softwares. I'm sure that there are more out there, but these are the 3 that are most easily accessible and are probably the ones that you're going to hear about if you want to check out 3D VTubing. Now, notice I said 3D VTubing specifically. I haven't said anything about VR. I don't have VR. I don't use VR chat. I will say though, one of the positives that come with being a 3D VTuber is that any VR chat avatar can be converted to be used in 3D software. Now you're probably thinking, what's the difference? The difference is that VR chat is essentially a game in and of itself. To have that running and also try to play another game, maybe something PC intensive like, I don't know, Elden Ring, Armored Core, Control, Alan Wake 2, just to name a few, would be very PC intensive. And to be honest, it's not the sort of thing that you want to do, even if you have a PC that can handle it. Now, my go-to 3D software is the first that we're going to talk about, and it is called Vseeface. Let me pull it up here. Normally, I don't like to pull the curtain back, but in order to explain why I've named the video the way I did, it's important that you understand just what's going on. Now, Vseeface is a free program. I'll leave a link to where you can download it for yourself, and you're able to import 2 different types of model format. The first being .vrm. .vrm is a Vroid model, and it comes with its own specific type of shaders. It's not really compatible with any other shading type. It doesn't look anything like what I look like right now. In fact, a lot of people, myself included, think that the VRM shaders look really, really bad. And any opportunity that you can use to change those shaders, you should absolutely do so. But when you first open up the software, it's going to look something like this. Your list isn't going to be as full as mine. You're going to have to click a plus button that says add avatar and then select one of the files off of your computer. Now I should mention that it does have Vroid Hub integration. I don't use Vroid Hub and never have, but it is there if you want to make use of that. The other way that you get your model into Vseeface is via Unity. Vseeface uses something called a VSF avatar asset bundle. An asset bundle is very different from a model format because it includes things like shaders, additional animations, and scripting. So, my ability to just whip one of these out of nowhere? Yeah, that's because I'm using an asset bundle. The asset bundle itself is proprietary to Vseeface, which is why it's called a VSF avatar. But as far as how long it takes for you to download and get your software up and running, Vseeface is absolutely the fastest. You open it up, you select your camera, you select your model, and then you're off to go. There are two different methods used to capture Vseeface in OBS. The most recommended is using the Spout 2 plugin, which is what I'm using now, which is why you very rarely see the Vseeface HUD. This. Most people don't want this to show up during their streams or their recordings, so the Spout 2 plugin makes it so that if you're capturing via this, you don't ever have to worry about that coming up. People seeing your buttons and your settings and stuff like that. If you, for whatever reason, you don't want to use the plugin, pressing the spacebar will pull up this little square down in the corner. And if you click it, it'll get rid of the HUD and leave you with this checkered background. Inside of OBS, when you're capturing this as a game source, if you click Enable Transparency, then the squares go away and you're left with just your model. But it's very highly recommended that you use the Spout 2 because it improves performance and all of that stuff. If you happen to have a Leap Motion controller, all you have to do is plug that in, make sure that you have the drivers installed and that the light is green. Click the Track Leap Motion button, and there you go. You can move your hands. And you can do it without any sort of fancy-pantsy VR tech. A Leap Motion controller at the time that I bought it only cost $100. I don't know what they go for right now. You can check on your own. I don't really use the Leap Motion tracking too much because it's a little bit awkward, and I'm not the type of person who talks with their hands, so I tend to not really mess with it too much. But I do have it, and it's not that difficult to set up. Vseeface uses its own tracking for stuff like emotions, expressions, and stuff, so I don't have to click buttons if I want to smile. If I have more advanced animations, or if I have more advanced expressions like Eye, those have to be mapped to a button, but generally speaking, I can smile, frown, blink, and it'll automatically pick up. And if you have glasses, it's not that big of a deal. So long as you're in a well-lit room and you're willing to adjust your settings, it should work just fine. I think as far as 3D software go, Vseeface is definitely the most user-friendly, fastest to set up, and once you're acquainted with it, you can experiment with other things without the risk of breaking things. There's still some risk, don't get me wrong, but it's not as much as the other two that we're going to talk about. Unfortunately for Vseeface, there are some issues. First of which being that the last update for the software was in February of 2023, I want to say. I haven't been able to get in contact with any of the developers to see if they're even still working on this. So for all intents and purposes, Vseeface is abandoned. It doesn't necessarily make it unusable yet, but I feel like at a certain point in time, as hardware changes, we're going to encounter a situation where Vseeface doesn't function properly. And the potential for new features and quality of life changes is gone because there are no updates. This has prompted me to look into some of the other software just so I can be sure that, I'm able to continue to do what I do moving forward into the future. Now, I might be paranoid. I might not have to worry about too much, but the fact that there hasn't been too much news or information makes me very, very nervous. But the other software have their own problems, and we're going to get into those. So, this is a recording with Warudo, and there's something about it that I like, and something about it that I don't like. The motion tracking through MediaPipe is a bit more lively, a bit more fluid. But the problem here is that all of the expressions are done through toggles, which I do not like. I don't like that at all. It means that it's not capturing any of my facial expressions, and I have to run through all of these different numbers in order to find an expression, which is going to make everything from recordings to stream a lot more stiff, less fluid, and that's not good. I don't like that. It's got a neat feature where you can change your pose through some things that they have set, but I can do my own poses, honestly. Like, this is neat, but because you have to go into a separate window, into like another option screen, and then scroll through a drop down, it's really just, it's not all that particularly useful. I don't foresee myself using this very often. It took me quite a long time to figure out how to get the leap motion to activate. All of the settings were right, but I had to do a lot of extra tinkering in order to get it to actually activate. Whereas in Vseeface, it was literally just make sure that the device was active in the drivers, hit the turn on leap motion controls button, and it just kind of works. Sometimes it'll get the hands mixed up, but usually after a couple of seconds that will fix itself and it will work as intended. But in this, I had to do a lot more fiddling around. So Warudo definitely loses points in that regard. Again, like I said, the tracking on the motions in general is a bit more smooth, and it's interesting that I can do stuff like this and look forward, but it's not tracking my mouth very well. Very stiff, and like if I frown, if I smile, nothing changes, which isn't good. If I could get the motion tracking or the expression tracking from Vseeface and the motion tracking from this, I'd be a very, very happy camper, but that doesn't seem to be a very big possibility. On top of that, Warudo has the issue of, in order to import your model with shaders, that's me rubbing my eye, by the way. In order to import your model with proper shaders, you have to use their very specific SDK or template project, which for me came with errors. Literally importing the project that I downloaded from them gave me a bunch of errors, and I was unable to use any of the features to import my model and get it into Warudo with the look that I was expecting. I had to essentially have Momo send me a project with my model already loaded into it, which doesn't really help me a whole lot because I had to go through her for one. Two, I'm not able to import anything else, so all of my weapons are gone. I gave her an older version, so some of my outfits are missing, and yeah, it's just not very convenient for me to use. Also, in order to do the walking in motion with gameplay that I've been doing for many years now, I have to use something called a node graph, which is something that for the rest of this video we'll be talking a lot of. It is a very complicated and very obtuse system of if this then that. I've never been able to get it to work in Warudo or the next software that we're going to talk about. But just getting it to activate my camera and start moving around and following me, that didn't take too long. So this software definitely gets second place as far as from time of install to being able to wiggle around. This definitely gets second place. As far as actually being able to use it, I don't really think that this is a great option for people who are new to VTubing. It does have a onboarding assistant, It does have an onboarding assistant. Can't even remember how to move. It's gonna walk you through how to do everything. Select your files, selecting your devices, your preferred methods of tracking, and all of that stuff. But anything more complicated than that, you have to figure out on your own. And it's not very user-friendly beyond that point. This seems to be another software with a heavy emphasis on integrations. And I think integrations are great. Streamers love it, viewers love it. But if you have to struggle in order to get just basic functionality, then going that extra step to integrate it with your Twitch or whatever is going to be just too much. Like, it's cool that the options are there, but at a certain point we have to prioritize usability. And this software and the next one that we're going to discuss don't really do that very well. The last and maybe most unfortunate program that I'm going to talk about today is Vnyan. And the reason that this one is the most unfortunate is because that I followed the developer, Vseeface, for a very, very long time. It's thanks to her tutorials that I was able to get pointed in the right direction on how I do some of my signature things, like running. And as you can see there, running and walking want to work in Vnyan. Toggles with some work seem to also want to function. But that's really about it, and that's really unfortunate. The problem I'm having with Vnyan is that the webcam, for whatever reason, will not work. But it isn't just this webcam. I have had 3 different webcams, not for Vseeface, specifically to try and to get Vnyan to work. Now, you don't need 3 webcams if you're going to be a 3D VTuber at all. Absolutely not. The first webcam that I had was a cheap Logitech. It's like 720p. And guess what? It works great with Vseeface and even Warudo. The next thing that I had was a 1080p sort of like generic Sony webcam. It didn't really have a name, but it was a higher quality. But it also did not work with Vnyan. But then that's when I got the idea. I was like, okay, trying my own thing ain't working. I went and found a VTuber that uses Vnyan and Warudo, and she makes her own tutorials separate from Vseeface, and she said that she used a Elgato face cam. Hey, I know Elgato. That's a brand that I hear all the time. I went and got one, and even still, it doesn't work. Vseeface was nice enough to invite me to her developer Discord for the software, and I really appreciate that. She took time to sit down with me and go through all of the possible issues that could be going on with my webcam. Firewall stuff, conflicting software. Now obviously I'm running 2 different VTubing softwares at the same time, but that's not really a problem for Vseeface. It wasn't going to work with Vnyan anyway, but I did want to show off a little bit of its layout. But several months, I want to say almost a year, maybe even longer, I've been trying to get Vnyan to work because Vseeface is a VTuber herself. She streams in addition to developing this software and making it available for people to use. It's got a bunch of different integrations, as you can see on the upper left here, for Twitch, Pulsoid, Tidify, YouTube, Kick, and even Chatterbait. It's pretty all-inclusive. And you can get it to work with your cell phone, both Android and iPhone. But it just, for me, refuses to work with my webcam. Now, I don't want to use my phone as a camera because I need it for other things. I also don't have a fancy pants iPhone. I don't like Apple products. So it was very, very important to me that the software works with a webcam, even if it does use up more PC performance. And it just won't do it. The other thing is that, once again, in order to get my walking and running to work, you have to use node graphs. Now, again, I've never gotten these to really work properly. I know if I do this, the model in Vnyan seems to work, but I stopped pressing the button almost immediately. It's treating it like a toggle, and I have no idea how to get it to be a button hold. So, for example, I'm holding the button right now, and I'm walking. Then I stop. I run. And then I stop. If you follow Vseeface on Twitter, you'll see a lot of very, very talented people creating some really fantastic and interesting things for their content, their streams, and their videos and stuff. But once again, I have to pull up the fact that priority is very important. And if I can't get something as basic as just the webcam to work, then there's no point in me looking into what it can do beyond that. And everything that it can do beyond that seems to be tied specifically to node graphs. Now, if you're familiar with game design, you're familiar with the Unity engine, a node graph is essentially the animation tab in the Unity engine. Very, very complicated stuff, not gonna lie. And not something that a newcomer to this is gonna want to have to deal with too much. Although they might want to consider learning it at some point in time, that includes me. It's just one of those things that's like, wow, you've made the barrier to entry incredibly high. Now, I should mention that all three of these softwares, Vseeface, Warudo, and Vnyan, all use the Unity engine. And that's going to go into my next major point. A lot of people are probably going to see this and think that just because three softwares have some usability issues or they aren't exactly user-friendly, doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have a future. And they'd be right. It's kind of a stretch to say that 3D VTubing doesn't have a future based off of just these three use cases. But there's a much bigger problem at play here. If I so much as say 3D, a lot of people are immediately going to jump to VR chat. VR chat is a 3D environment where people with all sorts of different avatars can go and interact and talk and play with user-generated worlds and games made inside of those worlds. The key there is that it's all user-generated. A lot of talented people spend their time investing into something inside of VR chat and not in anything else outside of it. What I'm saying here is that VR chat is cannibalizing a lot of people's talents for not only game design, but also 3D modeling, coding, and programming. And so long as VR chat is casting a shadow over the Unity engine itself, pretty much any software is going to be a cheaper knockoff version of VR chat. And the larger VTubers all have 2D models. So somebody who wants to get into VTubing is going to see them and hear about their favorite streamer spending tens of thousands of dollars on a 2D model that looks fantastic, and they're going to think to themselves, well, I can't afford that. Their only experience with 3D is going to be with VR chat. So they're going to think that the only way to become a VTuber is to get one of those expensive models. And as much as I'd like to tell them that that isn't the case, the truth is that in the long term, they're better off getting 2D model. All of the software that's compatible with 2D VTubing is significantly more documented. It's got much better support. You can find assets, tips, and things to do different things. The only problem is that it's just expensive to get into. But once you're in there, you pretty much are guaranteed to have a reliable future with tons of different software. I mean, for crying out loud, they're using the software for mobile games that are generating millions and millions of dollars. Unity, on the other hand, is not doing so well. Now, there is Codemiko, who is very much an exception and not the rule, who does 3D VTubing using the Unreal Engine. But even then, she's got so much technology, so much money invested into what she uses, that it's just completely unrealistic for a newer person to get into. It's too much of an investment. So when I say that 3D VTubing has no future, I really mean that until somebody dedicates the time to make something user-friendly, compatible with a lot of different hardware, and compatible with different formats and shaders and things like that, it's difficult for me to continue to encourage people to try and become a 3D VTuber, even if it is on the cheaper side. The barrier to entry is much lower, but if you do get into it, you have to understand that your options are abandonware and various other sorts of complications. And I understand that this could very well be a me problem. After all, there are other people who have gotten the Warudo Unity projects to work. Momo, for example, was able to do it in no time. There are some other people who are having the same issues with their webcam with Vnyan, but I'm sure that there's somebody who hasn't had that problem, and that's great. If you're able to do it, that's good for you specifically. But in general, when it comes to recommending the software on like a much wider scale, Vseeface is the best option, and like I said earlier, it hasn't been updated in over a year. That's really, really bad. That's not the type of thing that has a long-term future. So that's what I mean when I say that 3D VTubing has no future. And all of this is without mentioning the fact that you are at some point in time either going to need to learn Blender yourself or hire somebody to deal with Blender for you. Might not necessarily be required right away, but at some point or another you are going to need Blender. And that's an issue that I myself am struggling with to this very day. That's an ongoing issue that I've had from the beginning and will continue to have until I learn Blender for myself, which is an entirely different tool set that functions pretty much completely differently from Unity, despite looking kind of similar. But let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. Do you follow any 3D VTubers? Who's your favorite 3D VTuber? Do they also do 2D? Bet they do. Do you think that there's anyone out there who could develop a VTubing software for public use that's easy to use, but allows the freedom for experimentation and advancement? I want to hear about it. I'll leave links to all of these software and the people that I've mentioned in the video down in the description below or in the comments, so be sure to check them out if you want some more in-depth information. There's a lot of stuff that I glossed over because it's pretty specific and I don't want to show you too much of what I've got going on under the hood. But if you have any sort of thoughts or opinions, I'd appreciate you sharing them so we can have a discussion. Like I said, there's a lot of cool things that a 3D VTuber can do, but they need the software to not fight them at every turn in order to do it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all later.